Today is September 28th, 2020, and this past weekend, Trump announced his SCOTUS pick to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg as Amy Coney Barrett, and Trump and Biden are gearing up for their first debate tomorrow night. Welcome back to Split the Difference, everybody. We have a great show for you today, the same as always. It was an incredibly busy weekend this weekend with all the stuff going on. Our first story of the day centers around what everybody's been talking about for really over the past week or so, week and a half. And that is the SCOTUS pick, the Supreme Court justice seat that was left empty by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed away a week ago Friday. And Trump and the Republicans have been coming out, doing a lot of talking about the fact that they want to fill the seat. The Democrats have been doing a lot of angry yelling on the other side of the aisle, saying that there's no reason why they should be filling the seat right now. So Trump came out this past weekend and announced who his nomination is going to be, and he did decide on Amy Coney Barrett, which is who the vast majority of Republicans pretty much thought that he was going to be picking, right? She was a pretty standard for what the conservatives want. We will get into a little bit about who she is. We're not going to dive into every single decision that she's made. We're not going to basically break down the entirety of her life because that's what they're going to be doing in the Senate. That's their job in the Senate. But we will talk a little bit about what this means for the Supreme Court, what this means for you and me, for all of America. And we'll break down a little bit of kind of, is this a good thing, right? Should they be pushing this quickly for it? Is this, if you're a Republican, is this great news? If you're a Democrat, is the entire world going to fall apart? We'll kind of talk through a little bit of that. But he nominated Amy Coney Barrett over the weekend. Needless to say, this absolutely blew up, right? It was the number one story on every single news site. It still is every single story on, or the largest story on every single news site. But we're going to do our best on Split the Difference podcast because this is Split the Difference podcast, to take a look at the right side of the aisle. We're going to look at the left side of the aisle, and we're going to do our best to kind of find that sweet, good truth there in the center. So first thing that we want to do is just sit down and maybe watch the first minute or so of her acceptance speech. We'll go ahead and take a look at that now.
And I am so grateful to you and the First Lady, to the Vice President and the Second Lady, and to so many others here for your kindness on this rather overwhelming occasion. I fully understand that this is a momentous decision for a president. And if the Senate does me the honor of confirming me, I pledge to discharge the responsibilities of this job to the very best of my ability. I love the United States, and I love the United States Constitution. I am truly...
She gets a big applause for saying that. Which should be applauded, right?
I am truly humbled by the prospect of serving on the Supreme Court. Should I be confirmed, I will be mindful of who came before me. The flag of the United States is still flying at half-staff in memory of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg to mark the end of a great American life.
Okay, we'll go ahead and pause it there. That's about the first minute or so of her acceptance speech. She did accept the nomination, which everyone knew that she would. There are very few people that would not accept a nomination to the Supreme Court. But I think that we can undoubtedly say she is probably one of the more conservative picks that Trump could have made, right? So there were a couple of different picks. He had basically about 5 people on his short list. All of them were women. He decided that he wanted to nominate for the Supreme Court pick. And he ended up deciding on Amy Coney Barrett because I think she is much more conservative. So although it's only one seat, she is coming in and is much more on the more conservative side of things, whereas Ruth Bader Ginsburg was much more on the liberal side. And with this one seat, it is going to significantly tilt the Supreme Court to a more conservative side, which is a big deal, right? I mean, she is 48 years old, so she has the opportunity to sit on the Supreme Court for literally decades, right? Very much in the same way that RBG did. So the right side of the aisle, a majority of the right side of the aisle is very, very happy with this pick. They think that Donald Trump has done his constitutional duty, which technically he has. They believe that Donald Trump has picked somebody that is going to uphold conservative values for decades upon decades, which honestly I think is probably true too. And she seems to tick a lot of the boxes for the conservative argument or the conservative side. So she is very pro-life. She's very outspokenly pro-life. She is a devout Catholic. Which is interestingly enough something that she's receiving a lot of flack for on the left, which we'll get into that in a little bit as well. But she's pretty outspoken on the Affordable Care Act as well. There's been multiple opinions that she has written for a couple of different journals that basically display her displeasure with the Affordable Care Act and how she thinks that in a lot of ways it was pretty unconstitutional. And I think this is what the left had, the biggest fear of the left is that she's going to come through and start to kind of dismantle a lot of the legacy of Barack Obama, because that was his big thing. That was the thing that Barack Obama was kind of his legacy. So she's ticking off a lot of I guess good things for the conservative side of the aisle. But she is also somebody that is incredibly disconcerting to the left. I think that there were multiple other Supreme Court picks, one out of Florida that Donald Trump could have chosen, that I think the left, they would have still been upset about everything, but they probably would have been a little less upset if he would have picked somebody that was a little bit more of a moderate. So left side of the aisle are pretty furious and pretty scared, namely because she's young and she's incredibly conservative. She's going to have a long time on the Supreme Court. And if you're a Democrat, rightfully so, you have a pretty good amount to be worried about with this. So from the Democrats' perspective, it looks like that a lot of the achievements that they felt like they made in the Obama office are about to be dismantled. I kind of briefly I talked about that a second ago, but it looks like they're going to tear him down. If she gets onto the Supreme Court bench, and they do decide from a couple of different ways, whether it's, there's already a couple of different lawsuits in right now where the Affordable Care Act is kind of on the chopping block, and the Supreme Court has kind of just been kicking that can down the road for a little while. If she does end up getting confirmed by the Senate, which it looks like in all likelihood she's going to, then she, with a conservative majority, 6-3 vote on the Supreme Court, they very well could vote that the Affordable Care Act is unconstitutional, which at this point in time would negate coverage for somewhere around 10 to 20 million Americans right now. That's a lot of Americans, right? And the Democrats, rightfully so, are incredibly concerned about this. One of the big concerns that I have about all this is because there's no legislation in right now proposed by the Democrats or the Republicans to replace this if the Supreme Court comes through and says it's not constitutional, right? That's a little bit scary. I don't necessarily think the Affordable Care Act was bulletproof or that it was necessarily all that good of a thing. And I think that both Democrats and Republicans can agree that there was a lot of work that the Affordable Care Act needed, right? But I don't like the Republicans coming through and saying that they want to tear it all down or they want to dismantle the entire thing if they don't have anything to replace it with. Like, nobody's coming forward with solutions. It's just Mitch McConnell, for the most part, in the Senate, just screaming and yelling about how it's terrible, and he couldn't get enough votes to be able to replace it in the past couple years either, right? So the American people don't, by polling data, want Medicare for all, right? They don't want a total socialization of healthcare in terms of the majority of Americans, right? But they also don't want the government to come through and just ruin healthcare completely and not have any answers for it, right? They need solutions. And so if you're going to put somebody on the Supreme Court that is in all likelihood going to say that the Affordable Care Act is completely unconstitutional, then you also need to be able to have legislation to be able to back it up. I don't like the Supreme Court legislating, right? And that really seems like what the Republicans and the Democrats want. They want the Supreme Court to be the ones that are stepping forward and putting forth policy, right? The Republicans have been screaming and yelling that that's what Ruth Bader Ginsburg wants to do. We don't necessarily know whether or not that's what the Republicans are trying to do with Amy Coney Barrett, but if they're putting her in because they want her to overturn Roe versus Wade, or they want her to overturn, basically rule that the Affordable Care Act is not constitutional, then what they're trying to do is affect policy instead of actually getting it passed through the legislature, right? Which is not good. That is not what the Supreme Court was there for. So Kamala Harris tweeted out, I believe it was yesterday, maybe Saturday, she tweeted out, Trump's handpicked successor to Justice Ginsburg's seat makes it perfectly clear they intend to destroy the Affordable Care Act and overturn Roe. This selection would move the court further right for a generation and harm millions of Americans. I strongly oppose Judge Barrett's nomination. So, yes, the Affordable Care Act really kind of could be on the chopping block for this, right, with Barrett's nomination. Roe versus Wade is not going anywhere. I don't know why. I mean, obviously, it's obvious why especially the far left Democrats want to talk about this, because that's a huge pain point, right? If you're on the right side of the aisle, then you have to be pro-life. If you're on the left side of the aisle, then you have to be pro-choice. Roe versus Wade is not going anywhere. And so Kamala Harris is very purposefully trying to fearmonger here. She's basically coming out and saying, if you support, or if you don't try to stop Judge Barrett's nomination here and her confirmation to the Supreme Court, then Judge Barrett, who is a woman, is going to attack all women's rights. That's not going to happen, right? There's already a conservative majority on the Supreme Court, not including at all the fact that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg just passed away, right? So even with RBG on the court, there was still a conservative majority. And they, within the past year, struck down legislation in, I believe, Alabama that was trying to make abortion almost completely illegal, right? So it's not going anywhere. The vast majority of the people on the courts do not want to overturn Roe versus Wade. It has been in legislation for 50 years now. It's not going anywhere, right? So if you're extremely concerned about Roe versus Wade getting overturned, I don't think that that's a fair critique of Judge Barrett. Yes, she is very conservative. Yes, she's a Christian. And I do believe that she also has come out multiple times and said that she is pro-life. That doesn't necessarily mean that as a Supreme Court justice, she is going to overturn Roe versus Wade. There are a lot of things that have to happen in order for that to occur. And they don't have the majority on the courts because neither Kavanaugh nor Gorsuch want to overturn Roe versus Wade. So with all that having been said, the Democrats do have some legitimate fears here in terms of they're worried that Barrett is going to come through and she's going to have opinions that are going to be, much more conservative. They're not wrong about that, right? Of course she will. That's why Trump picked her. So what does all this mean? Okay. She isn't actually confirmed yet. One, she's just nominated. So Lindsey Graham came out and was talking through, basically they're planning on starting all the different interviewing processes, all the examinations of Judge Barrett on October 12th. So that's in about 2 weeks or so from now. And they're going to start looking through top to bottom what she's done, what her opinions on specific things are, how she interprets the Constitution, what are things that are important to her, and basically how she, as a judge, would hopefully, preside. How as a jurist, how is she going to preside? And I think that I feel, and as a lot of people feel, this is definitely going to be one of the more divisive decisions that has been made in a while. And this has the potential to hurt both sides pretty significantly, depending on how both sides react to how all this is going on. Okay, so on the right side of the aisle, they are undoubtedly ramming this thing through, right? I don't necessarily think that there's anything all that horribly wrong with Judge Amy Coney Barrett, right? I don't think there's anything all that wrong with her. She seems like a perfectly legitimate, nice person. She seems just like a pretty standard run-of-the-mill conservative judge, right? There's nothing wrong with having a bit more conservative judges or constitutional originalists on the panel or on the bench, right? I guess I would kind of prefer someone that's a little bit more moderate because I do think that Barrett is much more conservative, but I also don't think that her nor anyone else on the Supreme Court have the desire to go through and overturn a lot of these things that the vast majority of Americans are worried about them overturning, right? But what I will say is that by polling data, people normally aren't a huge fan of the political strong-arming that the Republicans are doing right now, especially right before an election. So we are a little over a month away from election, right? And Donald Trump and the Republicans and Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham, they're all doing everything they can to get this Supreme Court pick rammed through as fast as they possibly can, right? They're trying to get it pushed through because they want that majority on the Supreme Court. They want that conservative majority. And a lot of it is because they want to be able to, have policy prescriptions through the Supreme Court. Like I've said before, they are not doing anything unconstitutional. The screaming and the yelling on the left side of the aisle saying that they're doing something that's inherently wrong or they're doing something that is illegal, not true. Republicans are doing their duty. They are just doing it in a very politically strong-arm kind of way, right? They're kind of going back and contradicting a lot of the stuff that they said in 2016 that during a presidential election year. You should wait until after the new president gets in, or if the incumbent wins again, because if you do that, then you're really allowing the American people to have a voice in what's happening. I tend to agree with that, right? I think that we are way too close to an election in order to be pushing through a Supreme Court pick. If Donald Trump were to win again, then by all means, nominate somebody that's a conservative and put them through into the Supreme Court, because the American people have absolutely spoken at that point in time. But I don't necessarily know that the American people are super trusting of the United States government, especially not the federal government right now. It doesn't matter if you're on the left side of the aisle, on the right side of the aisle, or if you're a moderate and kind of in-between voter. Nobody really trusts the federal government right now, right? They just don't. And I don't think that President Trump and the Republicans trying to push through a Supreme Court pick as fast as possible is something that's going to be super beneficial for the Republicans in going into this election, okay? It would seem to me that Trump would want all the help that he can get in building and satisfying the trust of the entire electorate going into this election, right? But there are going to be a lot of people, one, that are moderates, that maybe are a little more moderate Democrats that don't like Joe Biden at all, or moderate Republicans that, don't specifically prefer Trump but don't like Biden either. They're going to look at the Supreme Court pick and they're going to be like, Amy Coney Barrett is way too conservative for me. And also, I don't even know who she is. I've had no time to get to know her. I have no time to understand who she is. I think this has the potential to actually end up hurting the Republicans in terms of them winning this next election, because they're trying to push this through and get a conservative majority on the Supreme Court that's going to last for a while. And there's a lot of Republicans that are okay with that, but I don't necessarily think that that's the smartest thing in the world for the Republican side. I could be wrong, but he picked somebody that was extremely conservative, and he did that very pointedly right here before a re-election. So Trump is either really, really overplaying his hand, or he's playing into his base well, and he's really amping up his base to show them that he's there for him. He's doing what it is that he needs to do. So another thing I think that also, you saw Amy Coney Barrett mention it a little bit, but the flags are still at half-mast for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And there was a lot of people in this country that very, very much liked Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You didn't have to agree with every single decision that she made. You didn't have to agree with all of her politics. But RBG was a good woman, right? And she was a patriot, and she loved her country very much. Right now, the flags are still half-mast, and they are already, as soon as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the news came out that she had passed away, the Republicans were like, we're going through with this. We're getting a nomination. We want it in. We want to get it done as fast as possible. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think that that's kind of a bad look. It really just is. I saw a couple of different ads that popped up on FoxNews.com, which shouldn't be super surprising. But on Fox News, there was a couple of different ads that popped up for shirts that said the Notorious ACB, right? Which is an obvious play on the Notorious RGB, which is what the left lauded Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They basically lauded her as, kind of this really, really big political figure. She was kind of larger than life. She was a champion of women's rights. And she has not been gone very long, and it seems like the Republicans are perfectly fine with just being like, we're just going to throw that out. That's old news. That's the past. We don't need to look at that anymore. And I think that there's going to be a lot of the American voting public that are not super keen on that. They're not going to love it. So with that having been said, the left side of the aisle has a royal opportunity to screw this up as well, right? It could also go very poorly for the left. So if you look at the way that the Kavanaugh hearings and everything happened with Brett Kavanaugh a couple years ago, happened right before the 2008 senatorial. A whole bunch of people were reelected, and House elections were happening. A couple of midterm elections for the Senate were happening as well. And if you look at the majority of people, were not happy with the way that went down from the Democratic side, right? The American public did not like the fact that they just took Brett Kavanaugh and raked him over the coals. It was terrible. I mean, that man was on national TV crying for like 2 or 3 weeks because of not proven accusations from 30 years prior, right? The American public did not like that. They didn't like the grandstanding that the Democrats did. They didn't like everybody jumping up and down and screaming and yelling in all those Senate hearings. Like, everyone saw the videos. Everybody saw how Kamala Harris acted, how Dianne Feinstein acted. Nobody was a big fan of it. And if the Democrats do that again, it is not going to bode well for them moving into the election. So if they try to take Amy Coney Barrett and just rake her over the coals, or have a bunch of, I don't know, just ridiculous accusations that come up that are not true, that just happen to be last minute and just happen to have all this stuff happen, it's not going to be good. Like, the American public is not going to be happy about it. The other thing, and you're already kind of starting to see some of these pieces start to play out, is if they get on the stand and they start just reaming Amy Coney Barrett out about her religion, it is also not going to bode well. Now, the America as a whole is not nearly as religious as it was 15, 20, especially not 40, 50 years ago, right? It used to be an incredibly conservative, majority Judeo-Christian country, right? That's not necessarily the truth anymore. But a large portion of the populace is still Judeo-Christian. If they get on and they start attacking her Catholic faith, I think that there are going to be a lot of people that are upset about it. Especially, maybe not even people that are religious, but people that are not religious and are like, well, her religion shouldn't have anything to do with it, right? Like, it should be totally fine if there's an atheist on the Supreme Court. Just the same way as it should be fine if there's somebody that's religious on the Supreme Court. If they start attacking her for a religion, there's going to be a lot of people that get very upset about that. And it will, without a doubt, galvanize Trump's base heading into the 2020 election. So this has potential to go already for both sides. It's going to be very heavily dependent on how things play out. If the Democrats, instead of deciding to get out there and just grandstand and say a whole bunch of ridiculous things or attack her for her being Catholic, if they decide not to do all that, it could be bad news for Donald Trump's campaign, right? But if they get up and do and say a whole bunch of terrible things, it may end up kind of really galvanizing and juicing up Trump's base heading into the 2020 election. So that'll be all for that story. We can go ahead and move on to our second story of the day. So our second story of the day is the first debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, which everybody is excited for. Is going to be happening on Tuesday, the 29th at 9 p.m. So tomorrow night, get your popcorn ready, get your Doritos, get you a cold beer or whatever it is that you like to drink. I don't know, water, tea. Sit down and get ready for an awesome debate. It is, I'm sure, going to just be a bellwether of a debate. You have two giant intellectual minds that will just be battling it out up there on stage. No, but in all seriousness, I really do think that there's a lot of people that are looking forward to it. I know that I'm looking forward to it because I think it's going to, in some ways, kind of settle a couple of different things. The biggest attack on Biden has been his mental cognitive abilities, right? Without a doubt, everybody's been coming after Biden because they've been saying that he can't keep up. He's not able to talk. He's not able to communicate coherently well at all. If he's able to get up, stand up there for 90 minutes straight, talk totally coherently, talks with a complete fluidity, he's able to carry himself well, I think a lot of those questions are going to kind of be put to bed, right? If he gets up there and stumbles over his words the entire time, though, it's not going to look good. But it'll go on for 90 minutes. There will be 6 segments broken up into 15 minutes apiece. The 6 segments will be, and you heard it maybe not here first, but you're hearing it here. The first one will be the Supreme Court. The second will be the coronavirus. The third will be the deflated economy. The fourth will be protests and violence. The fifth will be the election integrity. And the sixth will be candidates' records. So each of their respective records. All in all, it looks like a pretty very current events type of debate, right? It's going to, from top to bottom, be kind of looking at everything will be extremely current outside of the candidates' records, which I think that they have to have on there because they will need to be able to at least justify the things that they've done in the past, right? Which is going to be very, very difficult, I think, especially for Joe Biden because he's been in politics for a long time. We'll get into that in a second. So it'll be very interesting to see how they attack each other on each of these issues, though. They both are diametrically opposed, obviously, on a good portion of these, like the Supreme Court pick, especially. That is a hot topic right now. Chris Wallace out of Fox is going to be leading all of it. So hopefully it'll be, it's not going to be them just standing up there yelling at each other. I will say if there is anything that is prime Trump being Trump, it is during a lot of these debates. He blew up in popularity, especially after his debates with the Republicans, but then even more so after his debates with Hillary Clinton. When he got up there with Hillary Clinton and was, cracking jokes and was a little bit more relaxed than she was, and he was just kind of talking and freewheeling and doing his thing, people liked it, People liked it a lot. And I think that did very, very well for him going into the 2016 election. For example, like when he said she attacked Donald Trump on his relationships with women and some of the stuff that he said about women, and he just kind of very passively was just like, only when I'm talking about Rosie O'Donnell, right? Everyone thought that was hilarious. He just totally deflected it. Did not deny any of the accusations necessarily that Hillary Clinton made, but it just proves that, like, Donald Trump is just kind of like, hey, I'm me. Everything's baked into the cake. You know exactly what you're getting with Donald Trump. People like that, and it shows up really, really well in debates. So we'll have to see what Biden can do. So let's look through, I guess, these 6 things real quick and think about some of the ways that Biden can maybe score some points and how Trump can score some points. So with Joe Biden, the first thing is the Supreme Court. I think that Joe Biden could really win some points here. A lot of it goes into what I was talking about earlier. It's not necessarily because everybody hates Amy Coney Barrett. I don't think that she's really all that bad of a gal, right? She's not crazy. She's not, anything. She's not going to go in there and rule with some kind of ridiculous iron fist or anything like that. But it's very close to the election. And there's a lot of people that are very sensitive about it. So I think that if Joe Biden gets up there and hammers Donald Trump on it really, really well, basically saying that he's neglecting the American people, he's neglecting their opinion. If he was really confident about how he's going to win the election, then he would have been totally fine with waiting another month and a half before he made his nomination. I think that he could win some points here and really kind of hammer Trump hard on the Supreme Court pick. So we'll have to see how Joe Biden plays all that out. I'm sure that Donald Trump is preparing for that and he's ready to go with it. But we'll just have to see how it goes. The second thing is the coronavirus. So here, Biden, pretty much the only thing that he has to do in order to score points is he has to throw up his hands and he has to say, you, Donald Trump, as president, killed 200,000 people from the coronavirus. Obviously, that's not true. It is not Donald Trump's fault that 200,000 people or more have died from the coronavirus over this year. Not totally his fault. Yes, there are absolutely things that he could have done better, but Joe Biden was the same one that was ripping on Donald Trump way early on in the process when he canceled all the travel to and from China, right? So would Joe Biden have done better? Don't necessarily think so, right? But all he has to do is just throw out that statistic. It is very, very effective, and it's a good soundbite. And that's what most of these debates are even looking for, is they want to have good sound bites. They want to be able to clip things down, clip it up, and package that thing out to send out to a whole bunch of people. So if Biden is able to hammer President Trump and say, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Hindsight is always 20/20. So, Joe Biden has that benefit. He has the ability to look back over this past year and pick out every single thing that Donald Trump did wrong. Whereas Donald Trump, when he was sitting in office, he was having to make very, very split-second calls to try and make sure that everything gets taken care of correctly and the economy is still going and not falling apart completely, right? It's very, very easy to look back on something, and Monday night, day quarterback, right? Where you're sitting there the next day after Sunday, right? When the NFL teams or football teams would be playing, and you're able to say, oh, that quarterback did all of these things wrong. Well, it's much easier to do that instead of actually putting the helmet and the pads on and you're in the game. So third thing that I think he could hit Trump on is the deflated economy. The economy is not looking great right now. It hasn't for the past couple months. A lot of that totally out of Trump's control, but Trump's big thing for the past 4 years has been the economy. If you ask any Trump supporter what they like about Trump, they're not going to say that they love the way that he talks about people. They're not going to say that they think he has a ton of decorum. They're not going to say that he's extremely nice and he's an extremely beneficial person to have on the world stage. They're going to say, Donald Trump's looking great for my 401k. And they're not wrong, right? Up until earlier in 2020, everybody's 401ks were crushing it. And the stock market, for the most part, has kind of bounced on the way back up. It's fluttered a little bit over the past week or 2 or 3 weeks, but most people are very happy with the way Donald Trump has handled the economy up until this year. The reason why I say up until this year is because most people have pretty short memories. if we're sitting here in October, a month before the election, and people are not feeling good about the economy, they're going to remember that much more they're remembering, 2017 when the economy was going on all cylinders, right? So Trump also has a solid chance to score a couple of points here. So one, the protests and violence. The vast majority of the protests and the vast majority of the violence is in Democratic-run cities, and that is a huge point that Trump can hit on, right? Trump can come after the Democrats and basically say that they haven't been managing their own cities well. There's people looting, there's people rioting, there's people burning down buildings, and this is all terrible. Now, the vast majority of the protests have not been violent, and they haven't, devolved into rioting, okay? But many Americans are not happy with seeing this on the news day in and day out. They're tired of it, and they're ready to go. And Trump and the Republicans have blamed a lot of this on the Democrats because the Democrats really have waited a long time to call out and to fight against the violence that you're seeing in the streets. Now, I'm not saying it's the Democrats' fault by any means, but that's what Trump's going to say. Trump is going to say that the Democrats have condoned the violence and said that the violence is okay, and he's going to hit Biden pretty hard on all of this. I think Trump could definitely win a couple of big points here. Second thing that Trump could win on is the election integrity. Trump has been going on and on about the ballots for a long time, especially the mail-in balloting. Most people that I know do not necessarily think that the post office is the best way to be doing all of the balloting, right? Of course, there are going to be ballots that are coming in with fraud. Of course, there are going to be people that are taking advantage of the system, and that's not good. And I think that Trump is going to be hitting that pretty hard, especially because we're coming up close to the election, and he has been talking about this for a while, and I think he's going to have a couple talking points about why mail-in voting is not good. If he's got some statistics to back up some of the stuff that he's saying, I think he's going to be able to win a couple points on Biden there because most people don't trust the United States Postal Office for as far as you can throw it. Up until about 4 or 5 months ago when the Democrats were saying that the United States Postal Office is the best institution in the entire world, nobody thought that, right? It wasn't until Trump said that the post office was bad that everybody decided that the post office is just a great American institution, right? I mean, come on. Nobody legitimately thinks that the post office is incredibly efficiently run. So I think that the only area where both candidates are kind of up in the air, whether they can score points on one another or whether it could be bad, is the candidates' records. I think that Joe Biden's at a little bit more of a disadvantage here. So the reason why I think that is because Joe Biden has had a lot more things to vote on. He's had a lot more time in politics. He's been in politics for almost 5 decades now, which is a long time. And Donald Trump, if he gets up there and just starts reading off a list of all these things that Joe Biden supported or voted for over the past 4.5 decades, it's going to be tough for Biden to back up and to claim that, either he's changed his mind on some things or he's grown in some things. Trump can hit him hard here, right? But at the same time, Biden can do the same thing to Trump, right? There's been mistakes that Trump has made over the past 4 years. And there's mistakes that Trump made before he went into office that wasn't necessarily political, right? So Biden should be able to hit Trump pretty hard on a couple things like his reaction to stuff in Charlottesville. People are still angry about that. Tariffs with China. A lot of the Democrats and a lot of Republicans as well are not a huge fan of the tariffs that happen in China. If he's able to hit Trump really hard and talk about how much it's hurt farmers and how much it's hurt manufacturing and industry in America, I think that's gonna take away a lot of points for Trump. But I think that Trump does have a slight advantage here because at the end of the day, everything's baked in the cake for Trump. People know what they're getting with Trump. With Biden, he's changed a lot over the past 4 decades. So you're not really sure what you're getting. Are you getting progressive Joe or are you getting moderate Joe? Are you getting Joe that supports criminal justice reform or are you getting Joe that says we need to lock everybody up, right? You're not really sure which side you're getting here, and Trump can hit him pretty hard on that. So that having been said, those are the 2 stories for the day. We're going to end on something fun, something that made me smile. So this story is actually of a 3-year-old it's a story that I found on ABC News. It's the story of a 3-year-old that baked and delivered over 1,000 cookies to first responders amid the pandemic. It's this just most adorable little girl you've ever seen in your entire life, and she and her mother decided that they wanted to bake over 1,000 cookies and hand them out to first responders and to people that were going to be affected by working hard and very long hours during the pandemic. Whether it was hospital staff, supermarket employees, veterinarians, fire and police departments, all at a safe distance, of course. And they're quoted as saying, the world was feeling down and we needed some kindness. The mom of Devin Villa of Stillwater, New York, told Good Morning America. I thought, who doesn't love a chocolate chip cookie? This little 3-year-old could spread smiles, and I hope it teaches her lessons. So I thought that was an adorable story. There's tons of pictures of her just going around. Her name is Mia Villa, handing out cookies and baking cookies and giving them out to first responders, and I thought it was an extremely sweet story. So if there's anything you can do during all this crazy divisive times, bake your neighbor some cookies and hand them out, and I'm sure it'll make them happy. So with all that's the show. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, if there's anything that we do for Split the Difference podcast, is to stay reasonable, stay level-headed, look at the left and look at the right, split the difference, and find the truth in between. Thanks.